Hey there, my name is Mackenzie and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My little corner of the internet looks a little bit different since the last time you saw me in my previous video. I've moved. I'm still trying to figure out the filming situation, trying to figure out how best to film this. But we're gonna work with it. So today's video is somewhat of a part 2 to my previous video where I shared my experience with and thoroughly reviewed the Akamonkai pre-intermediate Japanese online language course. This video is going to focus a little bit more on what you could do in order to get the most out of this course should you choose to take it, or if you're already taking it. I'll also be taking a little bit of time to go a little bit more in depth, a little bit more detailed about some of the things that I didn't like about the course or issues that I had that due to time restraints on the previous video I wasn't able to fully get into, and I kind of had to set those things aside. I do think that they're important. I do think they're worth mentioning and kind of explaining a little bit further, but I think that if you're watching this video, you've probably decided you're going to take this course, you're thinking about it, you're on the fence, or you're someone who already has taken this course and you're feeling a little bit lost, a little bit overwhelmed. And so I do think that some of these particular points are more relevant to that group of people than people who, aren't watching this video, I guess. I highly recommend watching my previous video as I do give a lot of detailed explanations on what I liked and didn't like, especially what I didn't like about the course. And without the context of that, a lot of what I'm saying here might not entirely make sense, because I will not be going into depth about the main issues that I had because I don't feel I need to. I will be doing this under the assumption that you have watched that video already and you know what I'm talking about. So head on over to that video first, give that a watch. I know it's long, so grab a snack, grab a drink, get comfy, and sit down and watch that if you can. You don't have to, I'm not gonna force you or anything. If you can, if you want to, I recommend going and watching that first and then coming back here to this one. All right. Let's get started. One of the issues I have with the course that I talked extensively about in my review was the fact that you have so much flexibility to do the course, which is a con in the sense that without somebody holding you accountable or someone checking in, making sure you're doing things, you're doing your homework, you're doing this, you're doing that, it's very easy to kind of fall off of doing the course or to procrastinate doing it, and then you end up just binging the whole course and not really getting as much out of it because you're rushing through it and it's extremely stressful, and basically what I did. I did talk about my struggles with my ADHD in relation to doing this course, and also really kind of gave somewhat of a warning to others with ADHD that this course might not work super well for you either, because that was really the core of my struggle with it. But I do think that this course can work with the right structure. It's just gonna have to be structure that you make yourself, which is the hard part. Now, some of these things I'm about to say you've probably heard before, especially if you're ADHD. This is going to feel very familiar, but the reason that these things are recommended as often as they are is because they're tried and true methods. So they might be hard to do, they might be hard to get into, but they are always, almost always for most people, rewarding. They work. So we're going to start off by talking about scheduling. Pick a time, any time of day, whatever works best for you. For me, it's mornings. I tend to prefer to study in the mornings. That's when I feel the most awake, and then it's like once I've done the studying, then I've got a whole day to do whatever else I want to do. I find after, if I do it too late in the day, my brain is just too tired. It's too overwhelmed from everything from earlier in the day. But pick a time, same time every day, and make sure that you're there. You could even treat this like it's an actual class where there is a teacher and there's other students and you have to be there on time. If you gotta trick your brain, do it. Set an alarm, have a whole routine around it. For me, that would be something I tend to pair it with having breakfast. So I make myself breakfast and then I sit down at the table and I log on and I do the thing, right? My whole life in school, I had the same routine of getting up, doing all my morning stuff, like brushing your teeth, getting dressed. Once we had a dog, taking the dog out, and then I'd have breakfast, and then we'd go to school. And so doing my morning stuff, having breakfast, and then logging on and doing online classes felt very familiar to what I'd always done my whole life. So that worked for me. But you know, if you're someone who has work or school that you actually have to go to and you're doing this simultaneously with those things, then maybe you do it after school, maybe you do it at lunchtime, maybe you do it like, you know, do it however you want. But the key point of this is to do it the same time every day, or at least within a few hours, structured within a specific time frame and around other things. It makes it a little bit easier to get into the habit of forming that routine when you're stacking habits. The great thing about this course, and like I said, is that because it doesn't have a specific time you have to be there, you can do it whenever and you can do it at your own pace. But it really is a good idea, especially if you have ADHD. It's a very good idea to at least have a specific time for yourself that you do it. You'll be able to form that habit and you'll find it a lot easier to sit down and do it because it's your routine. Another great idea, and this one is so important, is to have a study buddy or someone that can check in on you, check on your progress, at least like even once a week, like every Friday. If you know that you have somebody who's going to be checking in, checking your work, and expecting to see progress from you at the end of the week, it'll make up for the fact that there isn't a teacher and give your brain that sense of responsibility and being held accountable. Now, I'm not exactly saying you should do this. I don't think Akamonkai would appreciate this suggestion, but I'm gonna give it anyway because this course is very expensive for most people. There's a lot of people, especially if you're young, who cannot afford this. And so one thing you could do, hypothetically speaking, is split the cost with a friend. If you and a friend or even multiple friends are interested in learning Japanese and are interested in this course but you can't afford the hefty $1,000 price tag individually, you could have it under one person, under one account, one name, but you all pitch in, you know, 2 or more people, you all put in your money for this course, and then you guys do it together. I would have done that if I'd had somebody who was willing to do it with me, but I don't know anyone else who's willing to learn the language and to have a schedule, a study schedule. For example, you could get together on like a Sunday, do a couple of days of the material, and then from Monday to Saturday, you're then off doing your own thing. You're practicing the material that you've learned, you're reviewing it, letting it really marinate in your brain. You're doing passive learning where you're doing things like reading and watching TV and getting practice out of that. And then you gather the next Sunday, you do a couple days of material, repeat. And because there's so much time to do this course, you have 6 months, even if you're only doing a couple of days of material once a week, you absolutely could finish the course within that time frame. And it makes it a lot more fun to be doing it with someone else and to have that sort of socialization every week. Now, if you don't have any friends or family who can be a study buddy or hold you accountable in any way, you could just use social media for that. Studygrams are a really great way to keep track of your own progress for yourself, but also to share your progress with others, to connect with other people who are also studying the language, who are also doing this course. You could keep a diary of your progress, which is what I did with my Studygram. I made note every single day of what day I was on in terms of like overall, like how many days I'd been doing the course, what day of material I was on, and then also what I did that day. Talked a little bit about the course and my experience with it and shared that with people. You could also do this with Tumblr if you still have a Tumblr account, and you could even do it with YouTube in a video format. You don't have to share any of this if you don't want to. The great thing about this method is that you can make these accounts private so that no one sees anything you're doing. It's just for your own sake. It might help you to feel like you're giving progress reports and also seeing your own improvement over time, which therefore might encourage you to keep up with the course. My final recommendation in regards to this particular topic is a study journal or a bujo. Now, this can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. This is a little bit different than just a regular notebook, keeping notes and stuff, but if that works best for you, I can't stress this enough, do what works best for you. So if having just a simple basic notebook that you just take notes in and it's nothing fancy, super basic, and that works for you, definitely do that. That's what I did for this course. I kept just a simple notebook, but if I had the materials on hand and the forethought to do this before I started the course, I would have kept a study journal. Now, I would probably do it something like a traveler's journal where you have different smaller notebooks that then you put them all together in the book. And so it's all organized. They're very separate little notebooks, but they're packaged in one convenient little book, right? I would have one that's a weekly planner for scheduling my study sessions and also making notes of deadlines and quizzes, one that's for progress trackers and resources lists, and another that is for notes, like grammar notes and such like that, like basically what I did do, but in a smaller format. I would maybe have a fourth that's for kanji and vocab writing practice, but I don't think that one's as necessary. I'm a big sucker for decorating and journaling and making the pages look pretty and aesthetically pleasing, so I feel like that would have encouraged me to keep up with things because I would have thoroughly enjoyed the process of updating that journal every single day. I'm really kicking myself for not thinking of that sooner, but you know, I really wanted to finish the notebook that I was currently on. I'd had it since 2015 and I really wanted to just finish it off. So I don't have any regrets necessarily. It's kind of like peace of mind knowing that that notebook is full and complete and I can just put it away and start a fresh new one. So I don't mind, but I definitely think I'm gonna do that when I study abroad next year. Okay, on to the second issue that I had with this course, the second biggest one anyway, which was the fact that the grammar is not explained well or sometimes even at all, and the fact that they don't really tell you how to use the material. There's no guide, there's no like recommendations. They have like the words down here and then they have the question up here, and like there's no English, like it's not available. So I'm just having to try to figure this out myself. And it's like, I don't know what it is that they're asking of me. They just kind of like give you stuff and you're supposed to figure out how best to use that. And that can be really problematic for some people who have no idea how to self-study effectively. The video practices, the repetition drills, the grammar slides, they don't really tell you how best to use that in the most effective way. So here's some ideas. For the grammar slides, those are particularly weird because they give you two different slides. One is just a blank version of it, and then the second one is like it filled in, and they read it out to you both times. And I never really understood what I was supposed to do with those. I was just making notes in my notebook of whatever the last slide was. But like now that I think about it, I think it was supposed to be for flashcards maybe. And I guess that is exactly what you could do with this. You could make flashcards out of them. I just don't know how helpful that would actually be for somebody, but it's something you could do. You could have the one side of the flashcard have the blanks, and you could have the other side have it filled in. You could also record the audio with your phone and then add that to it so that the front of the card, when you see the blanks, you also hear the audio as well. It could be a good way to test your listening skills and get familiar with that grammar. And you could also add other flashcards that have different sentences that use that grammar point so that you're continuously seeing that. You're getting the reading practice, you're getting familiar with that grammar. I think that could be a really great way to study the grammar points that you're learning. Now for the video repetition drills and also the conversation skits that they do, these videos are really fun. They can be really useful, but you're really not going to return to these things much once you've done them. You're going to watch it, you're going to get the gist, you're going to do the video repetition, and then you're never going to return to them, honestly. At least I intended on doing so and didn't have the time, but I really don't think I would have it anyway. So one thing I do recommend, because you should be doing these regularly, you should be coming back to them all of the time, whenever you can, I would recommend recording them with your phone, so that you have the audio, because there's no way to download these videos, or at least not a way I'm aware of. And then you could collect those recordings into an album on your phone. So like one could be conversation skits and the other could be for the video repetition, and you can just listen to them when, like, anywhere. You can listen to them while you're showering, you could listen to them while you're on the bus, while you're traveling, while you're going to work, coming home from work, while you're going for a walk, while you're exercising, while you're doing a nightly stretch routine, you're winding down at the end of the day. You could just have it playing while you're grocery shopping. The possibilities are endless. You can do it whenever. Otherwise, the only way to access these videos and stuff is if you log in to the course. I never did it on my phone browser. I always did this on my laptop, so I can't speak for how the course looks or functions if you're doing it on your phone, but that's pretty inconvenient. If I wanted to just do some of those practices, they weren't readily available to me most of the time, but if they're on your phone, you take your phone everywhere, and without the temptation of hitting the subtitle button or without the visual cues of watching what's happening on screen, it's really going to force your brain to listen and process what is happening in that scene. And so this can be very helpful for listening practice. I deeply wish I would have done that before I no longer had access to the course. So that is probably one of my biggest recommendations in this entire video. And with the video repetitions as well, this makes it easier for you to do those while you're doing dishes or cooking dinner or whatever. You can just be doing the repetition practices, so you're really getting a good use out of them and not just in the moment when you're sitting down and doing the study material. This also means that, at least in terms of the video repetition practice, you can skip that while you're actually doing your studying, and you can just focus on the grammar and the video practices and other things that you have to do. It's just one more thing you can just set aside, because you can do those whenever later. This method might not work as well for the video practices, because that does rely on a lot of visual cues. You have to be able to see it in order to answer, but it could still be helpful with listening practice, so it might still be worth it to use those in the same manner. As for the flip community aspect of this course, which, as I said in my review, I didn't utilize that at all, and I am here to tell you, you don't have to, okay? You can skip that entirely if you don't want to, but I do recommend you use it, because it is something in the course that is there, and you really should be utilizing as much as you possibly can about this course to get as much bang for your buck. If you're gonna spend over $1,000 on a course, you really should use it to its full potential. However, if you don't feel comfortable sharing your videos with the class or with the teachers, don't. You could still do the videos, but they're for your eyes only, so you can see your own progress and pinpoint where you need improvement on your own without anyone else's input or feedback. It might be helpful to get other people's feedback or the teacher's feedback, but it's not necessary. You can just click those as completed regardless. It's the same sort of concept of what I was talking about earlier with using social media to hold yourself accountable or to keep track of your progress. Things like YouTube, for example, making YouTube videos of you talking about your progress. This could fall into the same category of doing it, but keeping it to yourself. Now, we're hitting the tail end of this video. I do just have a couple little small general recommendations that I'd like to talk about. So the first one is to review, okay? I didn't do that because I had no time. So you kind of saw this at the end where I was doing the quizzes, and then it was like I'd stuffed my brain so much with so much material, and I wasn't really letting it marinate. I wasn't really letting it like sink in, that when I came back to do the quizzes, I couldn't remember the majority of what I learned, or I couldn't remember it well enough to do a lot of the work successfully, and that's why I got the mark that I did with those two quizzes. And also their quizzes were just weirdly designed and had issues, and so I think I actually did better than my marks would portray, but again, I talk about that there, so it's neither here nor there. The point is that you should be reviewing. If in a perfect world, if I could have redone this and done it properly, I would have probably done it Monday to Friday, 1 day of material a day as they recommend you do, and then I would have spent Saturday reviewing that week's material. Sundays would have been more like passive learning, things like reading, watching movies, listening to music, etc. And I think my Saturday reviews, and I would recommend you do this, should be not just about reviewing that week's material, but also the previous week's material, because you want to keep coming back to that so that your brain doesn't forget that. You don't want to overwhelm yourself too much, so that's why I recommend Sundays to be a break day. You really don't want to end up filling yourself too much and then you get burnt out, which is what I did. So having Saturdays as review and then having Sundays as relax days is a really good method to making this work long term. Do the quizzes when they're given to you. I just kept skipping them and figured I'd do them all in one go at the end, which is exactly what I did. And that was so stupidly stressful for nothing. I also spent a whole day doing quizzes for 6 hours that it turns out I realized too late that I didn't have to do that. I could have just done them later. And just mark them as done, because again, there's nobody checking, nobody cares. So I could have done the quizzes whenever. I could have also just not done them at all, but definitely do them when they come up. Don't do what I did and leave them for later. That's not a good idea. Don't do that. They're also a really great way for you to kind of see what's sinking in and what you're still struggling with. So it's good to do them when you get them, because then you know, okay, so these are the things that I need to kind of work on. And then when you do your next review day, you can really focus on digging those in. So like your next day of study, you can spend maybe like 20 minutes or so at the beginning of that session working on the material that you struggle with and trying to make sure that you understand that before you move on to learning new stuff. And finally, streamline. Okay, if there's something that you've tried to make work numerous different ways, even with the recommendations I've given, even with other study methods that you're familiar with, and that thing just isn't clicking, don't do it. Don't waste your time. The great thing about this course, like I said, in terms of the flexibility of it, in terms of the fact that there's no one holding you accountable for anything, the one positive of that is that you can take what works for you and leave what doesn't. You have the option of doing that. An example of this for me was like the video repetition, for example. I personally didn't find that helpful. I just found that I would get really good saying that one specific sentence, but then I'd move on to the next one and I'm back at square one. I can't get the sentence out of my mouth very quickly. I'm stuttering, I'm struggling. このグラフをもっと大きくしてください。この分の色を赤にしてください。I got like halfway through the course and stopped doing them because out of everything I needed to do for the course, that wasn't a priority. But I think if I could have utilized it the way I spoke of earlier, by recording the audio and then using it throughout the day, whenever I have time to just run through those sentences and do those repetition drills, I think that that would have been a very effective method. I think it would have been helpful and useful long term. But just the way that I was doing it wasn't working, and then I ran out of time, and I actually didn't think to record them until after I didn't have the course anymore, and then I thought I should have done that. So you know what they say about hindsight. But another thing that I also didn't really find useful was the kanji practice, because reading and writing are my two strongest areas. And when it comes to kanji, I've already learned all of the N5, 2, and 4 kanji, and like I learned them individually. Like I learned all the onyomi and the kunyomi. Don't do that. Oh my god, don't. Japanese people don't even do that. Just learn the kanji based on like the vocab. They give you a PDF, and the PDF has only vocabulary that include that kanji in there and the pronunciation. Make flashcards out of that, drill those, learn kanjis based on the words that they're in most commonly and not individually. Learning them individually is gonna literally take you years of your life, like me, that is completely wasted. It's not necessary. It will not help you long term. Don't do it. Another great example of this is actually vocab lists. Just make flashcards and drill the shit out of those. Don't write them all out in your notebook like I did. I started writing only the ones I super wasn't familiar with and might have to easily like quickly flip back to. if I saw them like used in an example sentence or something and I wasn't familiar. But I wasted so much time writing out vocab lists. Just don't. Just take the time to make flashcards. And actually, in regards to flashcards, speaking of, oh my god, only make flashcards for the words that are unfamiliar and words that you struggle to remember. If you look at it and you don't immediately remember what it means, it's a flashcard, okay? But otherwise, do not waste your time. I spent literally weeks of my life making flashcards for words I already knew just for the sake of completion. Don't do that. Just make the ones that you need. And they do have audio recordings of each of those words. Take advantage of that. Record those audio recordings and add them to your flashcards. That is a great resource. It'll help you with pitch accent. And also, my final flashcard recommendation, instead of doing them all in one go, or doing like every morning, or like the start of every session, making flashcards, do it all in bulk, my guy. Let's say it's Monday, and you have like Monday to Friday, like there's 5 days of vocab. Just go through all of them, make flashcards for the words you're not familiar with, or the words that you don't immediately recognize or that you know that are struggles for you. Do it all in one go. This will take you maybe like an hour or something, depending on how fast you're doing it. So that's a great way to do this, and that's what I wish I would have done. I did do that a little bit, like I started about halfway through, I started doing it that way, but I really didn't drill my flashcards often enough. I didn't get into the routine of doing that, which is on me, but I wish I would have, and that's how I would recommend you do your flashcards. And make that a routine habit that you do every Monday. You know, even on Saturdays, you're reviewing the things that you've previously learned. Take some time to then make flashcards for the next week, so that even just from Saturday until Monday, you've been drilling them a couple of times a day or even once a day is going to make a big difference. So on Monday, those new words, the new vocabulary, the new kanji, they're not going to feel as unfamiliar, and it's going to take a little bit of pressure off your brain from all the new material that it's learning that week. Take what is the most important and leave everything else, because the longer you sit there taking notes for hours a day or doing all this extra stuff that you don't need to do, that you won't actually look at or return to, it's just gonna burn you out because you're spending so much time on it that you just don't need to. You know what I mean? You'd probably get more benefit from doing stuff like the audio that I talked about earlier, recording the audio and listening to them regularly and practicing regularly outside of the course, than you are from taking constant notes and writing out kanji 1,000,001 times. Finally, the conversation notes, skip them. Just mark them as complete. You don't need to watch them, okay? I had like a whole thing on the conversation notes that I didn't get to put in the previous video because it was such a specific like gripe for me. Like it was so irritating. Like there was one where they teach you how to start a conversation, and they go through this whole thing where they're explaining that like there's 2 different types of conversations. One where you're asking for a favor or a question, and the other where there's no purpose behind it, you're just having a conversation, and this is how you start a conversation. And it's like, I know how to start a conversation. I'm a person, like, and then they did the same thing with how to end a conversation, and it's literally just like, even if you don't want to talk to somebody, like you're having a conversation with someone and you would like to exit that conversation, you can do so by just saying like, well, I gotta get going. And guys, if you're old enough to do a course like this, you know how to socialize. Like, it's just weird to me, to be perfectly honest with you, that they include stuff like that. I used the specific example of the back channeling that they talk about really extensively. I used that as an example for the review, but I don't think there's a single conversation note that's actually worth watching or writing down. I think only the first 2 maybe. For the first few lessons, I did entertain it. As you can see here, I did include some notes. This one was about casual speech. And then there was like this one, how to ask questions. That's what I was showing on here. The first 2 were about Japanese style like conversation styles, and then the second two were about how to start a conversation. And like the first one was sort of weird because like everyone knows how to start conversations and how to ask questions and or whatever. But this one was where I realized that this is kind of pointless to be making notes about. There's not really very many of them. There's two of the Japanese conversation style ones. Then there's how to start a conversation part 1 and part 2. There's the notes on, oh my, wait, sorry, there's actually there's more. There's 2 parts to part 1 of how to start a conversation, and then there's a part 2. Then there's also one for the strategy for declining an invitation from others, which I think I did make notes about. I didn't really need to, but I think I did. How to express modesty, and then this ridiculous one of back channeling, and then how to close a conversation. There's 8 of them in total, so if you're not including like the ones in parts, like just the general thing, there's 8 of them. For the most part, they're useless. Like you could completely skip that aspect of the course and it's not going to hurt you to do that. So I would recommend just skipping it. Save yourself some time unless you feel like watching them for fun, and then do that. But otherwise they're not necessary. You don't gotta worry about skipping those. And I think that's it for my recommendations. I hope that this is helpful. If you are someone who is currently taking this course, you're kind of stuck with it, you've already paid the money, and you're looking for ways to make this course work a little bit better, I hope that this was helpful. And if you're someone who is kind of on the fence about doing this course, you were pretty sure you were going to do it, but you weren't too sure, I hope that if you do choose to do this course, this is almost like a roadmap for you and you're a little bit more prepared going in than I was. And maybe this course can be a bit easier for you to do, a little bit less stressful and more beneficial. That's it for today's video. I hope that you found this helpful, and I will see you again in another video next week.